the lack of personnel is not only an ethical question, it's supposed to help people carry this burden. As this war proved, expanding the army became a requirement, and the HR crisis is very deep. How is the IDF dealing with it, and what are the security prices we're paying because the blanket is too short? All of these questions we will ask the next panel. I would like the former MK Ofer Shelach, the manager of the research program of INSS, the Brigadier General Reserve Yaron Rosen, former head of the IAF, an entrepreneur and angel investor, Maimon, a leading member of Mothers in the front line and head of the parliamentary front, sitting many hours in the Knesset, Major in Reserves Yoav Adomi, deputy battalion commander of 8111, and a leading figure in the Miluimnikim movement. Hello to you all. The speakers need to remember this great gap between people sitting yesterday in the Knesset trying to create the bill exempt Haredi men from enlisting, while 3 families in Israel were at the same time receiving the hardest news that is received. So, Rosen, I am asking myself, how could it have been that yesterday they dealt with the needs of the army? Well, first of all, it's quite clear than any other day, and with every day passing with these killed soldiers, that the value of service is not something abstract. It's very, apart from the need and the great burden that was talked about now. It needs to come to me from somewhere that is very different. I think that Frank touched a point that for me is very sensitive, as someone whose grandfather was killed during the war in the more or less the way Frank described directly about the battalion, from the ship to battalion, but this whole question of us having to speak about this basic civilian principle where the military service is not only a burden, it's also a privilege, where people need to want to serve, because this is in fact a love that you give back to something that gives you a lot, something that gives you. We are a very special state, and when I go around the world and I listen, people are envious about the fact that service, and into details here, this whole thing is going into a political arena, unfortunately, and this is in fact the whole story. It's the question of how you turn this military service for all into a basic principle for civil life that is the base for everything, because it is the base for everything, and this whole wonder of the state of Israel. And this is where we need to start, with the principle that says that it is a great privilege to serve, and it shouldn't even go to arenas of political agreements, of governments. It shouldn't exist. We are happy it hasn't yet. And Ofer, we will speak to you about the way people are now feeling burnt out. And I spoke to our military correspondent yesterday, and we spoke about the way things are in Gaza right now. And he spoke to me about the lack of combatant fighters. And he says, I receive messages from parents. The people are out of training right in high officers in the field without having the right training. And he says this is just one example to the fact that people are doing things that are not their roles. They are burnt out before even starting. They didn't go through training, that they leave the soldiers behind. So Ofer, what is the way things are at the moment? I will try to be very dry and give very dry data. The basis of values and emotional and anecdotes when it comes to people who touch it with their own hands, people who are sitting here and people who will speak after me. First of all, IDF has lost almost 900 fighters since October 7th. How many people were injured? It's thousands. I don't know exactly how many. A year ago, 5,000 that we now know of today, many of whom will not be able to go back to service because they were severely injured. Most of them won't be able to go back to service at all. But this is only the beginning, because These numbers have worked for us when we look at these people, who they are. I mean, regarding what you said, what roles they had, what positions they had, and the way it influences the whole HR pyramid in the IDF is actually much greater. Second thing is that the security needs have changed. Israel experienced, and ever since that, we've been dealing a lot also in the program under my direction with the consequences for the future. We work vis-a-vis different entities in the IDF, and it's clear that October 7th necessitates an increase in the army HR. To take only one datum that all of you here know, in order for people to be able to go back to live in the Gaza envelope and to the northern parts of Israel, we need to see military presence that is much more significant, and I will talk more about that soon enough, much more significant presence before, because people say there is security, this sense of security. It's all about the fact that a couple can say, I can raise my children at this community safely after what we've experienced. There's the question of the eastern border of Israel. Since, I mean, we are supposed to have a battalion, but the conception that's saying that there is a ground threat to Israel from the east. We've seen militias now, when there was an attack in Iran, that in fact the reservists that this year IDF told them one moment to the other, it's not 70 days per year, it's 110 days per year, which is the third year that they're doing a crazy amount of reservist days per year. It's impossible to maintain a life outside of the reserve, and people were asked to join back to reserves within a moment, and now they have parts of Israel, and these needs of the IDF are long-term. We now have the security conception now that is changing necessitates this. And the last thing that I have to say now, because we've published quite a lot of data, the solution of the system at the moment is to enhance the burden on the people that are already in. But apart from the fact that this is something unimaginable, the political resistance that doesn't even allow us that, because the IDF asked on January 2024 to prolong the basic service for young service as well as for reservists. But this discussion can't be held because this is not approved, because the politicians know very clearly that the public would not be willing to accept that for people in service, while they still exempt full parts of the population. So apart from this rift in the basis of this people, also the incorrect solution we are not able to apply because of the same point, which leaves the IDF lacking. One of the services who died last night was just doing these extra few months as he was supposed to be already released, which is even more painful. Let me tell you this, Sharon. IDF made a decision this week to in fact realize this prolong of service for battalion fighters, that they sign up once they join, once they enlist the army, not for 32 months, but rather for 36 months, plus the prolong it to 8 months. So they asked to realize something that they already signed for, and then they decided not to do it because of Now, there's a question of whether it should happen or not. It's a professional question, but even this question, when IDF thinks that it needs it, as long as we don't touch the not serving population, it's a problem. So we have two more people here. One is also wearing the reservist hat, and Ailat, you're also sitting in the Knesset committees, and you are bringing the voices that are coming from the field, that are people who cannot speak because they're in the ground, in the field, fighting, and you bring their voices to the different committees in the Knesset. What do you bring when you try to make people in the Knesset, the MKs, understand the stress of the burnout of the fighters, the not enough forces, etc.?
As part of the organization in the front, I deal with all that relates to the ties and the military. I was also part of the committee, the security committee. Any place I'm able to go and sound and voice those voices of those mothers, again, mothers of soldiers in compulsory service or otherwise, or reserve. It all starts at home. You know, when back home after 30 days in Gaza, he comes back home to us, and if he doesn't have that backbone and the support of The fathers, of course, no, we always say that if you have lost the faith of the mothers, you have lost the war. This is what is happening now. We feel that, in the air-conditioned rooms, the Foreign and Security Committee in the Knesset, these voices do not penetrate those rooms. So what do you bring to them? When a mother of a combat soldier, of an officer, wrote to me yesterday, please tell them in the committee that my son, between 5 weeks, every time, every round in Gaza, he doesn't even take off his shoes. I'm not even talking about taking a shower. Can you just happens to a foot of a fighter when he doesn't remove his shoes, those army shoes, in July for between 3 and 5 weeks? That means that the situation of our warriors, men and women, 30% again are women. There's a lot of wear and tear, a lot of erosion. Before going into the committee yesterday, there were again those parents of the Pumas, of those armored vehicles from combat engineering. They were there for the first time holding up signs, and they basically cried their souls out for all the fighters that were lost. And they said that the soldiers are with armored vehicles, supposedly, that are not really armored, that are not protected, and beyond that, we are exposing them to terrible danger. We've seen the results of this. We saw the results last night. What happened last night? Let me just say that, Sergeant Yuli Factor of blessed memory, who was killed yesterday, he's 19 years old. What does this mean? It means that he was drafted after the war broke out. That means if he was able to, the ultra-Orthodox community is also able to. That we say, oh, what will it help? Will it really alleviate, the manpower problems? So the answer is yes, absolutely. The new soldiers coming in are definitely alleviating that burden over all those fighters that have been there for so long. So we go to the security, the Foreign and Security Committee, and we go and voice all this pain. And when people come and say to me that, again, I want to be outside the door and I want to look at that politician and say, again, how are you not ashamed to send our children to go and fight when you want to exempt your own children from conscription? How many reserve duty days did you do this year? 340 from the beginning of Iron Soldier. Meaning that's almost an entire year of reserve duty. What does this mean? It means a few things. It means that oftentimes you get stuck on, in your job, your profession doesn't take off. It means that, life goes on without you, the family and otherwise. It means you can't really plan anything ahead. You can't plan anything for the family. It also means that the wear and tear, the erosion is so great. When we talk about, again, that the erosion of those serving soldiers, I think one of the vectors that is often mentioned is that of, again, coming for duty, appearing for duty. Number one is appearing for duty, but also these wear and tear of those who do appear to duty, and there are things that happen in the field. Now, when it comes to, again, to basically appearing for duty, I say that sometimes, there is this natural selection, because people are actually serving now in the 3rd, 4th round. These are the very best of our soldiers. But, many sort of drop out right on the way. What is happening in that internal dialogue? At least reserve soldiers that I talk to oftentimes say, no, I can't disappoint my friends. At the end of the day, the feeling that with all the high price that has to be paid, there is some sort of reciprocity. I can't disappoint my friend, but I also can't disappoint my wife who's just given birth and she wants me to be home. I can't disappoint my boss in my workplace. Again, there's such a great dissonance here the whole time. There is such wear and tear. Any event that happens in the Gaza Strip, I look and I can actually pinpoint and say where that erosion is manifest. I'm just trying to say in the most clear-cut way, by the way. For example, all those, let's take that event, that last event, for example, okay? At least one of the, I don't know the one that happened last night, but one of the recent events of, again, a cell that kind of went into this sort of an armored vehicle, actually shot an RPG missile, tried to right, Azulai, that was the name, David Azulai. They tried to kidnap, again, a soldier who was working on one of those engineer vehicles. I mean, how could it be that there was a vehicle, that engineering vehicle, that was working on its own? It was there on its own, or a Puma that's out there, another armored vehicle that's just there on its own. There's supposed to be forces around it, protecting it, and these events have to be reduced. I'm not saying to get to zero, but they really have to be reduced significantly. But again, when all the forces are worn and torn, they're less alert, then these events happen. And, you know, people, again, they work 7/7. And again, there are tanks there, again, with other stuff. Sometimes the tanks are there with no manpower, because what can we do? No choice, because, again, there's this marathon of rounds. You have to let those soldiers go out and breathe some. Now, the other vector is another point, you know, is suicide. You know, in the past week and a half, three soldiers committed suicide. Again, this is not mentioned much in the media, but that is a terrible catastrophe. Now, in this entire context, you know, this was pointed out, but I want to point this out again. Yesterday, we have again, those tankers that were killed yesterday. As this was happening, we saw the Knesset was deliberating and discussing how to exempt an entire sector from the service. This is crazy. You know, a pilot definitely can't be somebody who is forced to recruit. But let's say any fighter, again, who somebody who, again, will again be drafted because he is compelled to. Will that work? I don't think this discussion is correct in the first place. You know, the IDF knows how to contend with all sorts of soldiers. People who, again, commanded over soldiers know there are ways to draft, to recruit soldiers, to educate them. You know, IDF is one of the most important frameworks that this state has. It takes people, you know, it's that melting pot. You know, people come no matter what the background is. They meet, they serve together, they start running together, and then they are educated pretty quickly. But you just, again, describe the fear of the ultra-Orthodox. The fear of the ultra-Orthodox, by the way, that can be solved as well. As was pointed out before, nobody came and said, you know, what kind of service everybody will do. You know, even the three that were killed, there are people there that are ultra-Orthodox, right, or people who are religious. There's no connection. Meaning everybody will find the right role for that person. There's a variety of different roles and missions in the Air Force, by the way. When I was still in service, there was a project. It was called Blue Shachar, Shachar Kachol. And in the intelligence corps, there are projects for men and for women, in the computer sciences. And this is the basis, this is the foundation for everything that's happening in the state. I'm saying this in a good way, yes, in a good sense. You don't have to go to the extreme and ask that very radical question when somebody doesn't want to go and fight. There will always be those who want to fight. The problem lies somewhere else. The problem is not how we solve problems in the IDF, but how the ultra-Orthodox leadership is able to get up in the morning and to tell its sons and daughters that this is how they have to behave as citizens of a state. That is the very core of the problem. Until we do not solve this problem of leadership and do not pose in front of the leaders of this community what has to be posed in front of their eyes to explain what state is. That is Zionism, right? It's not the Jewry, the diaspora. We sort of converge into ourselves and we are persecuted and we're weak. No, we establish the state for this not to ever happen again. This is the meaning of Zionism. For us to have true Zionism, if they are living here, they have to be part of what the state demands, and that is protection, defense. For this, we need an army, and for an army, you need soldiers. So it's not a yoke or a burden, it is a merit. But again, their values are just different, right? That is why, again, it's all comes out in the political arena. You know, Ofer, we talked about the prices that have to be paid, but we'll talk about this as well. Because if we can't teach them that in terms of values they have to, why don't we talk about what our society, what our army, what prices it pays for having a shortage in manpower? Yoav related to this, by the way, in his words. Let's be honest. The IDF has to contend with a problem, again, that has to do with a problem that is all about money. When you tell a reserve duty that he works 7/7, basically what it means, it takes a soldier, he's a very expensive soldier, by the way, he's more expensive, again, than one who is drafted through compulsory service, and we have to pay him double, right? Now, let me just give you statistics in terms of the budget of this year. Yesterday, I was part of the budget committee, the treasury. We do all sorts of things together. We also looked at the budget for next year. Now, the meaning of this is that all the money that was dedicated for reserve duty, again, it was dedicated. They actually said there is this kind of a box. They say 10 billion shekels. That is 0.5% of the GDP. We will be able to increase the deficit from 4.4 to 4.9. That's 0.5%. The Nagel committee said, no, take it in order to, again, to reinforce yourself. Now it's taken for reserve duty, meaning this shortage in manpower, the significance is money and money and money. And our money is not something amorphic, it's not abstract. It means it's not going, it's not being channeled for, again, civil targets. There are prices to pay here. And I'm trying to be very dry, okay? Not emotional, because all those things pertaining to values, of course, were said already. Meaning, meaning it's spending all this money on reserve duty, but we need reserve duty, right? That's exactly right. Meaning, now, if we don't, I don't know if we'll talk about it here, but not even to mention that the macro significance of all of this, meaning that people, their lack of, again, service has to do with also not being part of the labor force, the workforce, and their rate is only half compared to other societies. So again, but let's talk about security. Let's stay with security. And even the price of life lost, that means of people who also they are worn and torn, they are eroded, they're not as alert, they're not enough people. A guy working at this vehicle all alone in the front, again, there's a price to pay. Of course there is a price to pay in terms of human loss of human life, I mean. Again, a study that was done outside of the INSS, but again, this was also published in the INSS. We have elaborated where these people are supposed to go, because you have to say this straight out. Again, in such a practical conference, the problem is with recruiting that young ultra-Orthodox is, again, because the problem, he never learned core studies, he has no values in terms of, again, civic studies, and I'm in touch with a lot of ultra-Orthodox, again, bodies and factors. That ultra-Orthodox youngster, he doesn't know how to work in a group, he doesn't understand what it means to sort of, you work for a specific mission, you set a target, you set a goal. Now they probably won't be able to go to those elite force. But again, for manpower in the IDF, we need all sorts of things. There are all sorts of roles. There are people who stand watch at bases. There are people who are, again, in the home front. They support. There are fighter supporters, as it's called. They are the backbone of the fighter echelon. We've elaborated all of this. We back a model that's called security civil model. I'm not even talking about national service. I actually am opposed to national service. We're not going to talk about it. But what I'm talking about, civil security service, it means serving in security forces that are not the IDF, okay? The prison services, the firefighters, the police force, because we have a big threat to the home front. There's it could be an alert team right now. From the 7th of October, there was all these alert teams. It costs so much, but the IDF needed to do it, because again, we all still feel that those alert teams, they cost a lot. But why shouldn't young ultra-Orthodox man these alert teams? It doesn't have to undermine the ultra-Orthodox way of life. by the way, I'm the only one in this room that I was part of a drafting team for compulsory, service law, recruitment law, and I know what it means to channel different people to different roles, and we can solve the problems in this way. So how do we expand the military service? So just to follow up what Ofer said, I do think that first and foremost, it all starts with education. It all starts at home. In the ultra-Orthodox sect, it starts in the yeshiva. When they hear their rabbis, takes their draft order, throw it in the bin, of course that message infiltrates. Now it's crazy to understand. The Sephardi party, I remember Professor Derek saying that whoever doesn't learn Torah has to draft. Suddenly, Shas has become extreme as well, like the Peleg Yerushalmi. It's all about education. So let me just say the IDF is not just, eat what you want, take what you want. No, it needs fighters. I saw the head of the Human Resources Unit in the Army saying, on the Security Committee said, our manpower is being reduced. It's dwindling because there's been loss of human life. I heard Yuli Edelstein saying that he wants to bring in a bill that will really help what the IDF needs. So I'm saying, how could it be that last night those who sat there in the Knesset wasn't even the chief of staff or the head of human resources? It was just members of Knesset. How could it be that while they're sitting there discussing during times of war, they can sort of pass, at our expense, this sort of an evasion sort of law? I mean, it's basically having these people not serve. I think that there is some sort of a line, a crisis line between those who avoid service and those who serve. And when I sat with my friends and mothers of soldiers, and mothers, by the way, very broad spectrum, from the Likud, from the right, from the left, and we cried out. We said, the IDF needs fighters. They need replacements. A whole year we sat on that committee, and till we hit that low point of last night, there is no time. With no time for long-term education processes. Again, nobody, does military service. It comes out in the same way. The IDF does everything it can to make everything compatible. And there is a Hashmonaim brigade. And, what is it? It might be, a company and a half. I don't know. I mean, and what will happen? People will lose their faith if they see a soldier wearing trousers, a woman soldier. No, then such people, it means that they are not strong of faith. It means that they are weak. We don't have to offer solutions. Those soldiers need their solutions. The head of human resources said, sanctions. We need to impose sanctions on such people. But again, let me just connect this. There is a law, compulsory military law. And under that law, our sons are drafted. All it needs is enforcement. Again, that law sort of is a game changer, right? The fact that you're there, you stood there looking at Yuli Edelstein, in his eyes. It's not easy, but there are really people who they are the one who bear the yoke. And mothers, when you are sitting there in the Knesset committees, beyond everything else that you do, how can we expand the ranks? So in terms of those sitting in the committee, how do we look at Yuli Edelstein? I'm from the Milumnikim, the reserve duty organization with Yoav Hendel, and we actually came with the objective to make that correction. And our point is that the reserve duty as a value, not only talk about during those drafted by emergency draft, they have to lead this correction, this rectification that is needed to save the state. And together with other NGOs and other organizations, we created that coalition of serving people. And we went to different committees, not only Yudi Edelstein's committee, but other committees as well. And we sat with human resources from the IDF to be able to make that change and to exert that pressure. And I think it oftentimes works. Now, the process that is needed, again, we need a few parallel processes. Education was talked of before. Ultra-Orthodox are just not part of that Israeli ethos. That's a long-term process. We have to work with the rabbis. You have to bring them to this point point. You have to work with ultra-Orthodox community. Okay, two parallel processes. Okay, so that's one process. The other one that I meant, which is essential, which is required right now, is to pass a decision, a Margaret Thatcher, okay, decision, call it that. Basically, unequivocal, that says that even this thing of value, which is completely justified, but also we have to talk about the security component. We need this in terms of security. We have to do it on the 8th of October, right away, by the way, instead of just deliberating and discussing time and time again. Yeah, Zamir again said, to send out 30,000 drafts. It's a bit late, isn't it? I think, again, the IDF, again, is something, it's led. They have to do what it's told to do. I'm looking at our elects in the parliament. I'm looking at the PM, at Minister of Defense, the head of the, Yedioth, and the head of the Security Committee. They have to lead. They have to give those instructions. They have to lead a law which means egalitarian recruitment for everybody. Of course, let's say there should be maybe slots given to some people who learn Torah, a certain number of positions for Torah learners. But again, that's basically just in one more statement about Yedioth, who was supposed to speak today. He kept promising us throughout that he will not pass a bad law. But in the meantime, again, he's fulfilled his promise. I'm giving him some credit. By the way, I'm not sure that he said that the minimum that I'm asking is not the maximum that ultra-Orthodox are willing to give. I don't think that the minimum he's demanding is good. But at the head of that committee, again, he has his responsibilities not only to pass the minimum, but to give a good law for compulsory service. Yes, you're on your concluding remark. As far as I'm concerned, again, such a law has to start with internal motives. You talk about the long term. In the long term, the state of Israel has to take leverage, this terrible, again, catastrophe, this terrible war. This has to be a turning point in civil behavior in Israel. And now where we channel this, which direction we take it, first of all, there is a problem of leadership that has to be solved. And all the rest, I think, will fit into place. Let me just say another sentence. In the framework of our sessions, our meetings, our legal expert, gave us all the different, exemptions that the ultra-Orthodox sector gets. This is economical, again, discussion. If an alien were to suddenly land in the committee and, it wouldn't know who we're talking about, he would say, wow, all these things, all the benefits, daycare center, discounts in municipal rates. He would probably think that these are all given to the very best people who serve their country. So why don't we start with just taking these rights away? I think this will be tested and clarified in the next 48 hours. Thank you so much. Let me just say that Itai, Chen, Matan Engeres, and all of them, we have to bring them home. The IDF fighters are right there. They're all there. They are all soldiers. Those kidnapped soldiers are still there. We have to bring them home right now.